Hello there everybody, my name is Joy and welcome to my tutorial on how to crochet. Today we're going to start with some of the basics. What we're working with today, or at least what I'm working with, is a 4mm hook. Oops. There we go, 4mm hook. Generally when you buy crochet hooks they will also have letters on them. Give me just a second here, let me grab another one. So this one, as you can see, is an H8 and was that a 5.0 millimeter hook. That's what you're going to find in most standard hooks. The one that I'm using today is from a kit that we got at a store for some project I can't even remember now. I'm just kind of working with the supplies that I have at hand. Most projects that you work on will give you a specific hook size as well as yarn weight. This is a pretty thin yarn that we're working with. It's maybe twice the thickness of crochet thread. But it'll work for some of the basics that we're going to be doing today. So what we want to do first is tie our slip knot. That's really the base for crochet. You have to have a slip knot. And how we do that is, oops, sorry. I'm used to crocheting, not tying the knot. Okay, so just make yourself a knot. Make sure that the knot itself is around the tail, not the thread that's coming from the ball. Because you want the knot to be able to slip. That's why it's called a slip knot. If you put it on the tail, then it's going to make your tail slip, and chances are it's going to make your project come unfurled. So make sure that your knot is on the thread coming from the ball, and then all you do is pull on that thread to tighten the knot around your hook. Make sure to leave it loose enough to fit over the widest part of the hook. Otherwise your project's going to stick. You're going to have some tight stitches. You're not going to have a very easy time. So the way that I do this, we are going to be doing left-handed crochet. I apologize if you stumbled upon this by mistake and you're a right-handed crocheter, but everything that we're going to be doing is left-handed because I do not know how to right-handed crochet. My grandma tried to teach me at one point in time and it just didn't work. I ended up having to teach myself left-handed, which is why I decided to do this tutorial. So the way that I do things is I take the thread coming from the ball and loop it around my pinky. I generally hold on to the tail in my left hand at first. Once I loop it around my pinky, I then loop it around my index finger. Then I take my middle finger, place it on the bottom of the knot, hold it with my thumb, and here we go. We are in crochet position. Now I take the tail here and hold it between my fingers. And what you do is, in order to get started with any project, you need a chain. Now there are some stitches where you can build the chain into the type of stitch that we're using, but that's kind of advanced, so we're going to get started with the basics here, and we'll get into that in a later episode. So in order to make a chain, you take your crochet hook, loop it under your thread, make sure that it gets caught on the hook there, because if it doesn't, like if your needle's like this, it's going to slip off. So your hook has to be facing toward you. And then once you loop it around the thread, you pull it through your knot. Gets you a little closer here, so I'm not used to working with a web camera. Here we go. And you pull it through. Seems pretty easy, right? We're just going to keep doing that a couple times. Loop it around, pull it through. Loop it around, pull it through. Oh, maybe. Now this can get difficult at times because some yarns have more than one type of yarn. That sounds kind of confusing, but you'll have like maybe an eyelash with a plush for a textured project. So sometimes when you go to like loop around or pull your stitches through or something, it'll get caught on one type of yarn and not the other type of yarn, or sometimes the single ply yarn that you're working with will fray, so it can get tricky at times. Now that we've got our chains, and don't worry if your chain is not uniform when you first get started. Mine was not always like this. I've been doing this for like 20 years now. Wow, that just made me feel really old. I've been doing this for 20 years now. It took me a really long time to get to the point where my stitches were uniform like this. And quite frankly, outside of my chain stitches, a lot of my single and double crochet still isn't uniform. So don't worry if it's not the most beautiful thing in the world from the outset. Don't be too hard on yourself. Everybody has to start somewhere. So now that we've covered our chain stitch, we're going to go ahead and get into some single crochet. And what I do is we skip the first stitch here, go into the second one, And what you do is going into that second stitch, I'm trying to get this as close as I can here. What you want to make sure you do when you go into this stitch is that 2 of the threads are on top of the needle and 1 is on the bottom. It's very important. And this time around, again, you loop the needle under the thread, or usually when I'm doing single crochet, I'll move the thread instead of the needle. It's just the way that I do things. But once you have your thread around your needle, again, make sure that the hook is facing towards you. Pull it through, loop it around your thread again, and pull it through the 2 loops that are on the hook. And again, this is kind of hard because my yarn's trying to fray on me. There we go. Okay, so let's do one more here. We go through the stitch, make sure that there are 2 pieces of yarn on top, 1 on the bottom, loop it around, pull it through, loop it around again, pull it through both loops on the hook. So let's go ahead and finish what we have here, just for a little bit of practice. We've already covered it. You'll get a little faster as you go along. Most people that I know will sit here and, I mean, you can watch TV while you're doing this. I used to work at a call center at one point in time, and in between calls I'd be like, you know, having a conversation. You can carry on a full conversation and sit here and crochet and not miss a stitch once you get used to doing it. Oops. Almost finished here. And as you can see, some of these chains are a little loose. It takes some time and some study. In fact, it's one thing I'm not quite good at yet, but to balance out the weight of the yarn versus the size of the hook to get your stitches looking the way that you want them to look. And just because a project calls for a specific weight or size of needle does not mean that your finished product is going to turn out exactly like the pattern says, because everyone has a different way or method, or depending on your level of expertise with crocheting, you could do the exact number of stitches called for and have a project that's either larger or smaller than the finished product is supposed to be. So with every project, most people will do a stitch gauge to try to figure out, okay, well, I'm working with this weight of yarn, I'm working with this size of hook, let's do this many stitches and see what size it comes out. And you basically have to practice with every project, and after a while of doing this, you'll get adjusted to being able to do that without having to practice on every project. But at first, like I said, it takes a long time to get used to this, so don't beat yourself up too badly if it doesn't look like that picture in the magazine that you're looking at. So here is our finished row here of single crochet. Let me try to get this on the camera. Like I said, I'm not used to working with a camera here. Most things I record are screen capture. Okay, so there are our first row of single crochet stitches. Pretty uniform. Again, I've been doing this for a long time, so mine are pretty good looking so far. In fact, I think that's the best I've crocheted in a long time because I'm actually paying attention to what I'm doing. Alright. So what we're going to do this time, since we covered chaining and single crochet, let's go ahead and do some double crochet. I'm going to try to make this about 10 minutes long. So what you want to do when doing a double crochet, you want to stitch 2. And then since we're doing row 2 here, we're going to flip our project around. You always want your beginning to be in your main hand. Wrap the yarn around your hook. You're going to skip this first stitch right here, go into the second. Again, you want to make sure that you have 2 pieces of thread, yarn, or yeah, there's 2 pieces there on top of the hook. Loop the yarn around, pull it through. For double crochet, we go under our thread, pull through 2 loops, leaving 2 loops on the hook, loop it around, pull through 2 loops again. Some people do not like the large hole that this leaves, so I have seen where you'll do 1 stitch and either a single or a half double crochet here. And let's do that one real quick. We'll pull this out. So you have 1 chain here rather than 2. And wrap the yarn around, go into this first stitch, pull through, and then you pull through all 3 loops. This is called a half double crochet, and it takes care of that awkward space there. So when you go through your second stitch and do your double crochet, it fills that in. And it will still count. You can still do an additional stitch here, because with double crochet, generally your chain counts as your first stitch in your pattern. There are some patterns that do that differently, and generally if they do, they tell you that in the instructions. But that takes care of that awkward space right there. So again, with a double crochet, you take your project, wrap your yarn around your hook, go into your next stitch here, again making sure that there are 2 threads on top of your needle, loop it around, pull it through, loop around again, go through the first 2 loops, loop it around again, and go through the second 2 loops. And there's our second double crochet. So let's go ahead and finish our row here. And again, you'll get faster at this as you go along, so don't be too hard on yourself if it doesn't come out exactly the way you want it to look. Yeah, see, my stitches are a little tight here. Now, at first, when you start off, it's going to be fairly silent. You're not going to hear anything. Some projects, especially the larger ones, if you're using the same hook and the same yarn and you've been working on it for a while, you'll start to hear a squeaking noise. I believe that's because of the treatment to the yarn, that it just kind of starts to coat the hook after a while. If you clean your hook, generally that'll go away. Sometimes it can be caused by sweaty palms, so if it gets to be annoying, there are various techniques out there to get rid of that. See how it's starting to come along? Let's go ahead and finish our row here. Yep. Okay. Yeah, see, this last stitch is kind of difficult sometimes. I didn't get all the yarn there, but it's okay. And there we go. That's our first row of double crochet. So those are some of the starting points of crochet. Again, like I said, don't worry if your stitches aren't uniform at first. That is why this is practice. Hopefully you haven't gone out and purchased dozens of skeins of yarn in the hopes of completing a project in a short period of time. You can, I mean, some people are really quick learners and you might be able to tackle this overnight. Some people, it's nice to, maybe buy used yarn at a garage sale or something like that, and, something cheap that you can just practice with, and it's not gonna need to be like a high quality product for somebody. That way you can, frog it as many times as you want. And when I say frogging, I mean tearing your project apart like this. I'm not sure who came up with that or when, but it's called that because you are ripping the stitches out. Rip it. Haha, yeah. So when you need to frog something, sometimes it can weaken your yarn, especially if you have a lot of stitches that aren't picking up all of the pieces of thread in the yarn. It can break the smaller pieces and over time weaken the strength of the yarn, and your project won't be anywhere near as strong as it would have been. But anyway, we've covered some of the basics today. In the next video, maybe we'll get into some triple crochet. There are plenty of other stitches and techniques out there, more advanced things. Like I said, when you do your single and double and even triple crochet, you can build the chain into it. So maybe in the next video we will cover that. But for now, we're going to go ahead and end the video here. And thanks for tuning in. Bye, everybody.